A glitch in the Matrix is a witnessed event that cannot be explained with logical thought. Throughout our lives, most of us will experience something that we cannot explain. Strange coincidences, a dream that later comes true, or a strong feeling of intuition. But when something happens that cannot be easily brushed to one side, the thing that plays on our minds, the things that seem to be a hiccup in reality, these are the glitches in the Matrix. Sit back and listen to the 15 scariest glitches in the Matrix stories. When I was 15, I was incredibly depressed and struggling with my OCD and anxiety. It got to the point that I decided to kill myself. I arranged everything, a note, when, where, how, and I waited. I waited about a week until my parents went out to dinner. I attached a note to my door telling my parents not to come in and to just call the police. I got dressed in my nicest clothes, showered, did my hair, and put the suicide note in my shirt pocket. My father had a number of guns, and I chose one of them to do the deed. A Beretta 92 handgun, or something like that. I went into my bedroom, turned on some music, and lay down on the bed. I put the barrel in my mouth, hummed a few lines of Free Falling Through Tears, and pulled the trigger. At this moment, I went into a third person type thing, where I was just watching myself. I saw myself laying dead on my bed, slumped over and bleeding everywhere. I watched myself lie in my own gore for what seemed like forever. Then suddenly, it felt like all the wind got knocked out of me, and I was back in my body. Click. The gun jammed. I just threw it on the ground and sobbed into my pillow for hours before cleaning up everything and going to sleep. I have no idea what happened that day, but I'm more grateful than you can imagine. After that, I really made an effort to turn my life round, and it did. It's scary thinking that I wouldn't be here right now if that gun had worked. About 4 or 5 years ago, I worked at Little Caesar's Pizza. Usually, I would work inside, making pizzas, but we had just started this Monday Madness deal, where pizzas were only $4 on Monday, so we needed someone to advertise. I was a wild and weird metalhead, so I took up the position. Most Mondays, I would just go out there, throw around a sign to get attention, and bring people in for pizza. Not exactly glamorous, but I had fun. One day, while I was out there doing my thing, I see a van coming straight at me. It jumps the curb and slams into me. I feel it crush me against the electrical box controlling the streetlights. I see a quick flash as the traffic lights flick off, then I black out. I gasp, and I'm stood on the corner. Nothing has happened. No van, nothing. I was a little shaken up, so I decided to pack it up and walk back to the store for a break. I walk no more than 15 feet from the corner when I hear a crash. I look back and a van just hopped the curb into the electrical box, and I watched the traffic lights flick off. Needless to say, I took the day off. I still think about this from time to time. This is the first time I've talked about this with anyone other than my husband. I've read some glitch stories and I think ours fits here. I'd like to preface this by saying that neither my husband nor I do any sort of drugs, suffer from mental illness, or abuse alcohol. We drink on occasion, but had not been drinking this night. It happened about 8 months ago. We lived in a small apartment with our 2 young children and our dog as we saved up for a down payment on a home. It was a typical Monday night around 7 p.m. We had just cleaned up after dinner. My husband was surfing the web and I was relaxing on the couch. I was reading the back of a cake mix, trying to decide if I had time to bake it, let it cool, frost it, and eat it before I needed to be in bed. My husband was watching a video on the internet. He said something funny about it. We both laughed. Then bam, I woke up, face down in bed. My clock read 8 exactly. My alarm hadn't been turned on. I was very confused and could smell the strong scent of coconut. I sat up and looked at my husband, who was also just waking up. He looked at me with a really confused look on his face, and we both jumped out of bed and ran to our kids' rooms. They were in bed asleep. We went into the living room, and the second our dog saw us, she started whimpering and sort of army crawling towards us. It was such unusual behaviour for her. I had never seen her act that way before, and have never since. Nothing looked out of order in our apartment, aside from one small detail. The cake mix I had been looking at the night before was gone. I searched everywhere for that cake mix and never found it. Another odd detail from that day is we were all dressed in our pyjamas when we woke up, except my youngest child. He was in the jeans and t-shirt he'd been wearing the night before. Neither my husband nor I would have ever put him to bed like that. Neither of us have any memory of getting into our pyjamas or anything else after laughing at the comment he made about the video. We were already late for work, so both called in sick that day. We spent the day talking about it and trying to make sense of it. At some point that day, he asked me if I had smelled coconut when I woke up. We have never found the source of the smell. To this day, I can't look at a cake mix or smell coconut without feeling a little anxious and sick. I've never told anyone but my mum this. In 2009, I was texting on one of those T9 phones. You remember those? Anyway, I was texting, and all of a sudden, when I was trying to send a text, no matter what I typed, all my phone would type was the word dead. Dead, 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 dead. That's what the text box showed no matter what I typed. At first, it was more of a moment, so I kept trying. Then I changed the word I was trying to type to a word that didn't use the same numbers as dead. No matter what I typed, no matter how many letters, it would literally only type one word, dead. I thought, that's creepy, and a few seconds later, it was fine. I didn't think about it again, until I found out a few months later that my grandpa on my dad's side, whom I didn't speak to at all, had died a few months back. It took me a little while to put two and two together, but the day he died was the day I got the weird glitch in my phone. Is that not just creepy? I had a black-eyed boy knock on my door last summer. I was watching TV just before midnight when I heard a really loud knock at my front door. Being late, I didn't want to open the door, so I walked into my kitchen and peered out the window which looks over my front stoop. When I pulled back the curtain to peek out, he was standing right in front of the kitchen window, looking directly into my eyes with those black eyes. He looked to be about 12, was wearing a plain white t-shirt and black pants. He was smiling eerily. I just stood there frowning at him, wondering why he was wearing those dumb contact lenses, because he wasn't dressed like a goth kid. He asked if he could come in to use the phone. When I asked why, he said, "I need to call my mum. Please let me come in to use your phone." I again asked him why he needed the phone, where he lived, and what he was doing in my neighbourhood. He said, "I live nearby and I need to call my mum." I again asked if he needed help or if he was lost, but he kept repeating, "I need to call my mum. Please let me use your phone." He wouldn't answer any other questions. I finally lost patience and told him bluntly that I would not open my door and I would not let him come in, and he needed to get out of my yard right away. His smile disappeared and he looked furious. I closed the curtain and quickly grabbed my phone and called my brother, who is a local police officer. He said he would come right over to see if the boy needed help. I warned my brother and he seemed unstable and might be dangerous. As soon as I hung up, I returned to the window to see what direction the boy was going, but he had disappeared. My brother arrived a few minutes later and he told me he'd circled the whole neighbourhood and there was nobody outside. I have never seen this boy again, and I hope I never do. I was 16 and a typical teenage boy. It was the summer of 1993. My parents had sent me to Outward Bound, a month in the outdoors with other troubled teens, pushing our limits, making us learn trust, etc. In reality, hiking 10 miles a day with 40 to 60 pounds on your back in the middle of nowhere with other misfits, just trying to get through it and back to our lives. We were in the Three Sisters wilderness of the Oregon backcountry. Beautiful land. We were about 2 weeks into our month-long trip. I became close with a girl named Ava in my group. There were about 10 girls and boys and 3 guys. There were about 10 girls and boys and 3 guides. 1 man, 2 women. Ava was from Sweden. I had been to Sweden a couple of years earlier, and we were able to talk about places I visited that she knew. I'll never forget her. I was completely crushed on her. Beautiful blonde with green eyes. Tanned for a Swede. The night before my incident, she and I kissed, and we made out a little out off by where we camped. We got caught by one of the guides and told that relationships, and especially sex, were not allowed, something they drilled into us from day one. No drugs, no sex, no alcohol. We were just kissing somewhat innocently though. I had also been friends with a guy named Steve. He had gotten blisters on his ankle the first week, and it had got quite infected. The guides wanted him to drop out and go to a doctor, but he soldiered on. We kept it clean and bandaged, even though he had a noticeable limp. He still managed to keep up with all of us just fine. He talked the guides into thinking it was no big deal, and he stayed. He had an amazing willpower, and I kind of looked up to him. He was almost always our group leader. Now came the weird part, the part where everything changed for me. We were taking a lunch break alongside a gorgeous crystal blue glacial-fed pool. There was a minor waterfall, maybe 10 feet high, from the stream above feeding it. The water was deep, but absolutely crystal clear and blue. And cold, very refreshing after a hot summer hike. You could see the soft gravel bottom. 5 large boulders stood in a perfect circle on the bottom, as if set there by someone. Completely submerged, they were perfectly equidistant from each other. Someone quickly noted that there was just enough room in the centre to dive off the waterfall and swim down to the gravelly, beautiful bottom. A couple of the other kids, including Steve with his injured foot, went and dove. I, of course, wanted to impress Ava, and she said it looked fun, but was too scared to do it. She said she would try if I did it. My teen ego immediately rose to the challenge. I climbed up the wet rocks next to the waterfall to the top. I remember looking down at the beautiful crystal blue water, the light filtering through the forest leaves, Eva looking and smiling up at me. It was just a perfect, beautiful day. I jumped. The next thing I know, I'm on the side of the pool coughing up water, with 2 extremely concerned guides nursing over me, and a massive headache. They're telling me I hit my head on one of the boulders. I'm lucky I'm not dead. Steve is nowhere around. Ava doesn't look a mote concerned. She's off gossiping with one of the other girls. A couple of the other kids are with me, and the male guide helps me up. The waterfall is there, but the pool is now a murky green-brown. You can barely see the boulders on the bottom. I think I just must have stirred some dirt or something when I fell. I wasn't thinking clearly. I seem okay. The back of my head hurts, although my forehead is the part that has a minor cut. The third guide comes up at this point and makes me do some tests. What year is it? Who's the president? What's my name? Etc. It's 1993. Clinton is the new president. All is right in the world. We take an extra long lunch just to make sure I'm okay. The guides decide I probably have a minor concussion. They should keep me up all night just to be safe. They decided we're going to hike to a closer, alternate camp, since I might be concussed. If things get worse, they call the rangers. I didn't notice until later, but Steve was not with us. Ava seemed decidedly standoffish, and I didn't get much of a chance to talk to her. The guides wanted to keep me behind them, 1 in the back, 2 in the front. At camp that night I noticed Steve is missing. I freak out thinking we have left him and tell the guides. The guides quickly calm me down. They tell me Steve hasn't been with us for 4 days. When his foot got infected, they called the rangers and the rangers took him to town. He could barely walk, and now he's out of the program and has been sent home. That made no sense to me. I could have sworn he was with us. I remember all 4 days of him hiking with us and his foot getting progressively better every day. I didn't say anything else. I didn't want them thinking I was crazy. I figured because of my head, I misremembered, although it was all so clear. I remember talking to him at lunch. That night, it got weirder. The guides were going to take shifts staying up with me. I asked Ava if she would stay up with me for a little bit. She looked at me like I was crazy, and her accent was different. She just laughed at me. The male guide noticed, and he said to me that I was one hell of a persistent guy. We talked. He said I'd been after Ava the whole time, and I really should give it up. He was nice about it, but it got through to me that I was being a creep, or at least he thought so. I didn't understand. He said it wouldn't work anyway. When she gets back to Brazil, you'll never see her again. Brazil, not Sweden. Brazil. Ava was from Brazil. This was not true. I thought I must have taken a bigger hit on the head than expected. I just stayed quiet from that moment on. I was so confused. I stayed up all night thinking of things, and in the morning I felt just fine. The rest of the trip was uneventful, but everything seemed suddenly slightly different from me for that day on. I never understood exactly what happened. I suppose it's just the head injury. That makes sense, but some part of me just doesn't believe it. My world shifted that day. The memories before that moment are as clear and as easy to recall as what I had for breakfast this morning, or my wife's face. Even after I got back, my parents seemed different. They kept telling me what a changed and different person I was. Outward bound is supposed to change you, just not like that, I guess. The whole world seemed different. Computers seemed better overnight, like I didn't remember having such a cool computer, just a bad one. Everything seemed different. Video games are more popular and better. The rest of high school I felt like an outsider. I had always fit in before, but as the years passed, I've grown used to it and grown back to my old or new self. Even though I have a rational explanation, my head injury, I have always doubted. I wonder if the Matrix reprogrammed itself, or I switched consciousness with an alternate me, or somehow, through some fluke of the universe, I slipped through into a universe almost, but not quite, the same as the one I came from. I'm late 30s now, and happily married, and I still think about that day, and that crystal blue pool. Last December, I was suicidally depressed and had applied for a leave from my studies at university. I was told that this was impossible and I would have to fail. I went into a tailspin. I took several handfuls of aspirin, prescription painkillers I had left over from an old injury, and antidepressants. I drank a bottle of wine, got dressed, and went to a party. Here, I kept drinking and lost my memory entirely. I woke up the next morning in someone else's bed and walked home. When I got there, I showered. The pill packets and bottle in my room were gone. I opened my email, and the letters I'd been sent by the university's administration were unread, and what's more, they had changed. I'd been granted the leave I needed. I had no trace of a hangover. When I left the house later, I ran into people I'd seen the night before, and no one mentioned having seen me there. I'm worried I died. What I took should have at least made me very sick, if not killed me. I hadn't left the house in months, let alone gone to a party or slept with someone. Since then, my life's improved immeasurably. I left school, got an internship, and have been offered a scholarship to return. I've started dating someone new and perfect, but none of it feels real. The direction my life's taken is a sharp 180. I think I might have just died alone in my room that night, quantum suicide style, and now I'm in a different universe entirely. When my grandfather passed away, my mother and I just moved into our new home. Within a week of his passing, I had a dream that the phone rings and it's him on the other line. He says, "Hey Heather, do you know who this is?" I didn't know what to say because it sounded like him, but I knew in my dream that he had passed away. He just laughs and says, "I don't have much time, can I speak to your mum?" I say of course, and run into the room to give my mum the phone, but I dropped it and it got disconnected. The next day, I tell my mum about it, and she gets a serious look and tells me that he called her in her dream and said, "I don't have much time, I need you to turn off Heather's heater." She wakes up, goes into my room, and the heater is shooting flames out of it. The heater was an old plug-in one that was his, and I used it every night, pointing it at my bed when I went to sleep. I'm not sure if this is even a glitch, but it's a sacred story from my family, and it gives me chills the few times I tell people. This happened about 2 years ago, when I was going through the necessary classes to be able to take my driving test and get my license. The classroom portion of the class was several sessions of 3 hours, and was done through my local YMCA. It's about halfway through the course and halfway through tonight's class, so I'll say it was around 7:30 p.m. Now, the classroom is fairly large, and the tables and chairs were set up in a U-shape that made it so everyone's back was to a wall. One of the walls was lined with windows, and that just so happened to be the wall my back was turned to. In the middle of the lecture, we were learning about the proper technique into merging onto a highway. The teacher was drawing roads on the board when all of a sudden I heard a window shattering, followed by the loudest ringing and buzzing in my ears. At the same time, it was as if someone had slammed my head into the table with an incredible amount of force. The most startling thing was that when my head hit the table, I didn't feel it. As a matter of fact, I didn't feel anything. My head felt lighter, but for some reason I couldn't move a muscle. It felt as if my entire body was locked in place while everyone in the room started screaming. I could hear the sound of chairs being knocked over as some people ran, and I even heard a few people vomiting onto the tile floor. This whole time I was just staring at the white table that was now covered in my brain matter and blood. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. Then, in an instant, I was back. Everything was normal again, except for a slight ringing sensation in my ear. I immediately turned around to see that the window was still intact behind me, and the teacher had just begun to draw the picture of the highway on the board again. Needless to say, I didn't sleep well that night, and I sure as hell wasn't going to drive home when my dad came to pick me up. In early 2000, I was working at a juvenile detention center in a small town in Oklahoma as a corrections officer. I was working nights at the time and went to work at 9 p.m. This one night when I arrived for work, my supervisor looked confused and asked me what I was doing there. I worked tonight, and he said, "But they said you called in a few hours ago saying that you were sick." I was a bit confused and said it must have been someone else and they got the message wrong. After everyone else showed up for work that night, it was a bit more weird. But we carried on as usual and assigned everyone their places for the night. I went to work in the control room where I usually go. The control room is the center of the prison that has direct control over the cameras, doors, phones, and everything else. After I relieved the guard on duty and settled in for the night, I looked at the message that said I had called in. It said I had called at 6:50 and said that I had gotten sick while out cleaning up from the storm. There had been a storm the night before, and it was a bit bad, but not anything that I had to go out and clean up. It was truly weird. The supervisor came into the control about that time. He was also a friend of mine outside work, and we started talking about it and how odd it was. I decided to call my wife at home and tell her about it while he was still sitting there. I picked up the phone and dialed. After 2 rings, a man picked up the phone and with a raspy voice said hello. I didn't know what to say for a few seconds. I looked at the phone to make sure I dialed the right number, and I had. After a few more seconds, the person said hello again, in the same raspy voice. I said, "Who is this?" "This is Taylor. Who's this?" the person said. My head started spinning because my name is Taylor. I said in an almost scream, "Where is Anne?" He said, "Anne's in bed. Who is this?" I dropped the phone and told my supervisor to ring me out. I had to get home, and I took off towards the door. I could hear Dave pick up the phone behind me and say hello, followed soon after by "What the fuck?" rather loudly. I ran to my car and drove home faster than what was legal, my mind racing the entire time. I busted through the door, and my wife was sitting watching TV and was shocked at me being home. I asked her who was there, and she said no one's been here. After a rather long talk with my wife, I went to call the prison to tell them what was going on, but the phone was dead. I went back to work, and when I came in, Dave was acting weird and asked me, "How the hell are you doing this?" He told me that when I left, he picked up the phone and the person on the other end sounded like me. He kinda freaked out and hung up the phone. A minute later, as he could see my car leaving the parking lot, I had called back from home and asked what the fuck was going on. He said that I was a bit irate and said I was sick and didn't feel like playing these games and was telling him to stop prank calling me and hung up. After convincing him I had no idea what was going on, we went back to work. Later, I found out that the phone line for my area had been knocked down the night before by the storm. This is absolutely the strangest thing that has ever happened to me. This happened a few months ago. I was driving through farmland in eastern Oklahoma at about 2 p.m. on a sunny, cloudless day. I was on a highway that is as flat as it is straight. You can drive for miles without taking a curve and can spot any driveway or country road well in advance. Anyway, the speed limit is 65, but I was pushing closer to 70. The truck behind me was riding my bumper. It was a white Dodge, early to mid-2000s model, with an extended cab, track lights across the roof, dually tyres. The windshield was pretty tinted, so I couldn't tell anything about the driver. Finally, the road split into 2 lanes, and the truck started to pass me. I checked my side mirror to make sure of the truck's position beside me, then looked ahead again. A car, a burgundy sedan, was coming up the opposite lane. We were maybe 600 feet apart when the car driver slammed on the brakes. Panicked, I looked to my left at the truck, thinking it was veering into the oncoming lane, but there was nothing there. I slowed down, looking back over my shoulder for any sign of this huge truck, and nothing. I rolled to a stop as the driver of the car was getting out and shouted, "What the hell, did you see it?" I told him, yeah, he was passing me, but it blinked out. This guy was really shaken up. "It was right beside you and it just blinked out." I was getting really nervous. There were no roads leaving the highway, and the ditches were just a shallow slope at the edge of the pavement. If the truck had wrecked, we could not have missed evidence of it. Still, we decided to drive back on opposite sides of the road and look for any signs. We drove for almost a mile, much further than needed considering how quickly the incident took place, leaning out of our windows and moving at about 5 miles an hour the entire time. We reported to police, and I kept track of the local town's news site for the next few weeks. Nothing. I wish I had thought to get that man's name, because we both know what we saw. Through my life, a lot of weird stuff has happened, and this one is up there with the weirdest. This happened when I was around 16 years old. I was a fairly normal kid, spent a bit too much time on the computer though, so I'd made a lot of friends with both nerdy kids and popular kids. It all started when I met this nerdy kid who I'll call Gavin for the sake of the story. Gavin and I became decent friends because of our interest in World of Warcraft. Gavin was a really socially awkward guy in real life, although he's a cool dude to talk to online. He's also a genius, who has an IQ of around 180 as far as I remember. I did the same test he did in school and I got 103, so it's the real deal. Gavin and I came to each other's houses a lot after we became good friends. We would chill, play World of Warcraft, watch videos on YouTube, play chess. He was a pretty cool guy, and soon enough, he was one of my best friends. One day, I decided to come over to his house uninvited. Might be a dick move, but I was a teenager at the time, and I just thought we were really good friends, so it was cool. I knocked on his door, and this older looking guy opened, around 40. He had a little bit of grey hair and a beard. Now at first I assumed this was Gavin's dad because they looked eerily similar. But then I remember that Gavin doesn't have a dad, so I assumed he was a relative. I asked him if Gavin was home. He laughed and told me he's Gavin. I found it a bit weird, but it could be a coincidence, or Gavin was simply named by his uncle. I told him that I'm looking for a 16-year-old Gavin, described him to the guy, and he started looking uneasy. After some hesitation, he said Gavin was not home. I asked him when he would get home, didn't really go into questioning who he was, and he gave me a time after thinking for a few seconds. So then I came over at the given time, and my friend 16-year-old Gavin opened the door. I told him that his relative was there. He told me that he has no relative with the same name as him, and he also told me that he was home at the time I came and met the 40-year-old. We both found this extremely weird, and our only explanation? Gavin's a time traveller. I still keep in touch with Gavin, who happens to be studying quantum mechanics at the time. We still haven't told this story to anyone. I know a fair amount of these stories are feasible to explain and are basic coincidences at most, but hear me out. This may be long, but I was thoroughly disturbed last night at work, and it seems like a glitch for me to even found this subreddit the day after my experience. Let me just say that I am known to be a pretty observant guy. All my friends and family who know me even slightly well are aware that I notice everything. It's pretty hard to slip something past me. Not to say I'm proud or a cocky asshole or anything, but it's just a little background into me before you read this long story. I have worked at this sandwich joint for over 1.5 years. We run a tight-knit crew. I am a good employee, in good standing with the owner and the manager, and I am a little bit of a night crew manager myself. The restaurant itself is very slow, as we tend to receive maybe 20 to 30 customers within my entire 6 to 7 hour closing shift. This means that I naturally tend to start conversations with customers. I like to figure out where people work their day jobs, where they went to college, how their lives are, and all that stuff. You could say I get personal, but hey, people like it when you're not just a robotic employee. I even met a dude who went to Berkeley Law School, and he told me a lot about life and school and all that, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, I like to talk to people. It gets me through the days, you know? And generally, people are pretty damn nice about it. I even have a little mini arsenal of conversation progression. Just headed home after a long day's work, huh? Nice, where do you work at? Oh, that sounds cool, did you do a degree for that? Oh, nice, where did you go to college? Did you like it there? Most conversations are extended versions of that, and it usually gets interesting hearing about such diverse backgrounds. About a week ago, this man came in. I would say early 30s, dark hair, dark features, sweatpants, a Nike sweatshirt with his hood up. It was late at night, say 9:30ish, and I was ready to close this bad boy up and get home, but had another half hour to kill. So I said, screw it, let's start a conversation with this guy. Maybe his dad is like a congressman or something cool. Maybe I'll learn something from him. Holy hell, this guy was creepy as shit. He wouldn't meet my direct eye line. He would talk to me by looking above or between my eyes. He kept his left hand tucked in the back of his pants waistline. I realise that sentence is a bit hard to visualise, but the best visual I can give is like when people took a gun in the back of their pants. It was like he was clutching a gun. He kept his hand there the entire time. He was looking nervous and reluctant, as most people who commit robberies do, and as the sandwich making progressed, I was becoming more and more sure that I was about to be robbed. He asked for a ham sandwich on white bread. The way we lay the ham is pretty formulaic, but due to his creepy demeanour, I was admittedly feeling nervous. The 8 slices of ham ended up being folded over at different ratios, laid on top of each other sloppily, and did not look too appetizing of a sandwich. The man asked for Swiss cheese. The formula calls for 4 slices, so, as I always do, I pick up a stack of triangularly cut cheese and fan it all out in such a way where I can grab 4 and throw the rest back into the pile. I lay the cheese in a less than orderly fashion, and the sandwich is still clearly missing its picture perfectness that you see on TV. These details may seem irrelevant, but I just want you to know the gist of it. You'll see why. The man asked if I could toast his sandwich. This means that I would have to turn my back to him for a few seconds to put it in the toaster. I was running through a lot in my mind, and I was not prepared to turn my back on him. This caused a mini sort of panic, and I grabbed his sandwich and attempted to stand in such a way where I could keep my eye on him with my waist twisted, just enough to get the sandwich in the toaster and still be looking at him. As you may have guessed, I dropped it. I dropped the sandwich. I made a basic attempt to catch it as it fell, kind of flared my knee up and tried to use my waist as a cushion to hold up my elbow to catch the sandwich, to no avail. I was panicking hardcore. In the few seconds before I looked up, I was bracing myself for a very angry creep staring at me. But he was gone. He had left. He vanished. I didn't even hear the squeak of the door, the footsteps, nothing. I ran outside. I looked left, looked right, looked left again. There were no cars driving away. No cars were even remotely parked close enough for him to be hiding in or behind. He was just gone. The sandwich was still on the ground, fallen face down. One of the triangles of cheese landed in just perfect angular contrast with the tiles on the floor. Of the 8 pieces of ham on the sandwich, 6 were left on the bread, while 2 pieces flew off and landed adjacent to the cabinet on top of which the toaster is located. Fast forward to last night. A man much older than the first comes in. I would say 60s, white hair, dark features, probably 6'6". Was probably the tall, dark and handsome type dude in the 70s or something. Pretty nice man, until he started ordering his sandwich. I just got chills typing that last sentence because I have no idea how to proceed with the story. It just gets unsettling for me. He ended up asking for white bread. I started to carry on my casual conversation. "How's your night going, sir? Just getting off work?" The man answered with a stern affirmative and offered no other information. Okay. Clearly this guy didn't want to talk about anything other than his sandwich. Weird. "What kind of sandwich for you, sir?" "Ham." "Alright, pretty stern guy. No nonsense. Maybe he's in the mafia or some shady shit and he's got nervous when I asked about work. Alright, fine. Let me make your sandwich and you can get out of here." He then reaches behind his waist, in the exact same way the first guy did. I swear to God, the gesture and motion were the exact same smoothness, timing and form. He kept his left hand there the exact same way the other man did about a week ago. The same way. Everything started eerily coming back to me now. It was like the most jolting deja vu moment I had ever had, and I honestly thought it was just that, deja vu. But wait, there's more. The way I ended up laying the ham looked very, very familiar. The distance between each slice, the way each layer peeled off the stack in ratio to the next, the way the slices folded over. I can honestly swear to you that I was building the same sandwich that I built just a week ago. I was having one of those moments where a bunch of shit just passes through your mind all at once. It was actually kind of surprising how many thoughts you can have in such a short amount of time. But I remember telling myself, take the risk and just reach for the Swiss cheese, because I had a feeling. How do you know I wanted Swiss? I was taken aback. He actually wanted Swiss cheese. How in the world do I pass it off as a lucky guess? Well, exactly how you would think. Lucky guess, I uttered, as I let out a meagre, pathetic chuckle. The man proceeded to say the most spine-chilling thing I had ever heard. I've read stories about paranormal or weird stuff happening to people. I always see variations of the quote, chill down my spine, and I've never really experienced that. I experienced that last night. The man looks at me as if I told him I knew the winning lottery number for the next win. Very inquisitive, with a very, very strong sense of passion in his words, he said, "No, seems like you've done this before?" He just called out my déjà vu. He just confirmed that he was aware of my déjà vu. At this point, the phrase time traveller just made its first entrance into my mind. I looked at him with the most ridiculously awestruck impression. I'm staring at him for a good 5 seconds before I laid the cheese. It was a surreal moment. It was like the climax of this confrontation had already happened. But I still needed to lay the cheese and veggies, roll the sandwich up, and ring him at the register. How much creepier is this gonna get? I just didn't get it. I picked up the cheese in the exact same way I always do. Fan out the top 4 slices and lay them down. I was looking down at the same sandwich I had built a week prior. I swear to you, the cheese, the bread, the ham, everything was uncannily similar. I credit myself to be a rational dude, so at this point I'm just calling it déjà vu and trying not to feel disturbed. The man said, "Just lettuce and mayo, no toast." Phew, not toasted. Thank the good Lord. He didn't want it toasted. This déjà vu is over, and it's all just a coincidence, right? Well, some of you may not know, but there is a thing called a hot food tax in some places. Therefore, when a sandwich is toasted, there's a button for hot food tax, and it's something like 12 cents. So as a force of habit, I read the order back to the customer. "Alright, sir, so a ham sandwich not toasted with a bag of chips and 2 cookies?" He looked very concerned with why I mentioned it was not toasted. "Why do you have to specify it's not toasted?" Then I explained to him what I said above, all about the hot food tax, blah blah, force of habit, because if the sandwich is toasted, you repeat the order like, "Alright, a ham sandwich toasted with chips and a drink," or something like that. After explaining that to him, he just looked inquisitive about it. Nothing too weird. I didn't want to keep him any longer, so I took his card, swiped it, and could not wait for him to get out. As he walked out the door, he looked back at me with the creepiest fucking smile you can conceive in your imaginations. He turned around and says what I honestly don't think I'll ever forget. "Just to let you know, I didn't not toast the sandwich because of the tax. I'm not that much of a cheap bastard." Okay, the guy is trying to lighten the mood, right? Sweet, yeah, I know he's not a cheap bastard. I mean, it's 12 cents. But he felt the need to tell me the real reason he didn't get it toasted. "I just didn't want you to drop it." And just like that, he was gone. I have chills everywhere. This was without doubt the most spine-chilling thing I've ever experienced. I explained the whole thing to my father, and he came up with the idea that these 2 men were probably father and son and were just messing with me, and I'm making up the rest of the details in my head. Impossible. Do you know why? The man who owns the restaurant I work at owns one other, just one other, halfway across town. When Guy 1 came in, I was at a store that was about 8 miles away from the store that Guy 2 came in. The realistic chances of these 2 men knowing each other and tracking me down, finding me across town, and messing with me like this is impossible. I and 3 other employees are the only 4 that jump between the 2 stores. The chances of this being a planned prank is absolutely outrageous. I have no idea what I experienced, but if you actually took the time to hear all this, please tell me if this is a legit glitch in the Matrix. I live on the far northwest side of town, but I work in the heart of the city. I used to drive and park, but when I realised I could take a single bus a block from my house and it would drop me across the street from my building I work in, I started riding the big green limousine. 3 days of parking was the same cost as a 2-week bus pass. Not to mention the gas saved and the lack of stress dealing with downtown driving. Anyhow, I've been doing this for 9 months, and I've got it down to a routine. I leave my house at the same time every day. I see the same people at my bus stop. A young woman, about 20, gets off at the engineering college. A mum and her young son always get off to transfer to another bus. And a guy who works at the local cable company, who I talk to on a regular basis, who gets off at the transfer point for another bus. 4 days a week, I have the same bus driver, Frances. There's a fill-in that varies between a bunch of different drivers on a Monday. She's a very friendly lady, and on nights I don't sleep well and doze off. She's been known to get up from the driver's seat and gently shake my shoulder to wake me. My stop is the last on the line. After my stop, she hits the downtown terminal and turns around. Most days there's 2 other people that get off at my stop. An older lady that works in my building as a teller in the bank on the first floor, and a younger guy with long, pencil-thin dreadlocks that he ties in a ponytail. He always pulls the cord for the bell as soon as we pass the stop before ours. The manner of his dress says he works in a business casual environment, but not in my building. On Thursdays and Fridays there's another younger woman who also gets off at our stop. Very pretty, dresses sharp, works in my building. When I stop at the coffee shop in the lobby, she turns and enters the first bank of elevators. She either works for the bank itself or for the investment firm that is housed on the upper teens floors. Like I said, routine. Today, it was different. The front of the bus has 2 rows of 3 that are turned so the backs face the windows. These are for the elderly or disabled travellers. They can fold up so wheelchairs can go there. I always sit in the first seat on the driver's side that faces forward. The young guy sits 1 seat back from me, but on the other side of the aisle. The bank teller lady sits in the back. Today, after most of the passengers clear out, there was a girl sitting in the disabled or elderly seats. Not a big deal, people sit there. They just have to give them up for the elderly or disabled. She had multicoloured hair, mostly green and blue, held back with a scrunchie. Wearing a red and black grey flannel shirt, not tucked in, but buttoned up over a black t-shirt, a pair of jeans and a pair of high-top sneakers. I remember what she was wearing for a couple of reasons. One, I've gotten older, but in my youth I was big into the alt scene, and she was dressed like a lot of the girls I hung out with back in the day. 2, physically she was cute. Fit, well proportioned. Here's where the glitch starts. I think of her and I know she was cute, but I can't picture her face. At all. No features, no makeup, no piercings, anything. All the things I would look for to get the idea of cute. It's not coming back to me. It's totally blank. But I can picture every article of clothing she wore. including the black and silver bands she had on her right wrist and the silver rings on her left hand. I can tell you her shoes were Chuck Tees, not black, but a red flannel pattern, similar but not the same as her shirt. But I can't picture her face at all. Her fingernail polish was black, but chipped in a few places and needed a retouch. But I can't picture her face. Maybe for other people that's normal, but not for me. I can picture clear details about her that are stuff that I never notice. Stuff my girlfriend gives me crap about not noticing on her. But I can picture this girl sitting in front of me crystal clear, and it's 4 hours later, and I still have this image of this girl in my head, clear as a bell. There's a couple of stops left, and she turns from sitting back to leaning forward and looking towards the front of the bus, looking out the big open window, down the main avenue, out at the lakefront. I remember, to my embarrassment, noticing that her rear fit those jeans very well. I remember turning her head to look at me, over her shoulder. I have the distinct impression of her smiling before turning her attention back forward again. We pass the second to last stop. I look over at the young guy as he pulls the cord. He yawns wide, uncovered. I smirk and yawn as well, invoked by his yawn. I rub my eyes, and when the fog leaves them, she's not there. Confused, I look around the bus, like somehow in the half second she moved out of view, like behind me. The young guy is doing the same. We look at each other, then at where she was sitting, then back at each other. And we both have this look on our face, like we both know something happened, but neither of us can figure it out. The bus comes to our stop. Still confused, I get up and walk to the front of the bus to get off. See you tomorrow, Francis. Yeah, she should be back tomorrow. I turn around after getting off the bus, and instead of the chubby, giggly, warm black lady that took my fare as I got on, it's some old skinny white guy with a long face and a big bushy moustache. He smiles, closes the door and drives off. The young guy who got off with me pauses, opens his mouth like he's going to say something to me, but just walks off, shaking his head and rubbing his neck. The cashier lady who exited from the back of the bus stands next to me, waiting to cross the street, chuckles, looks up at me, and says, "It's going to be an odd day today. I can just feel it, you know." I still don't even know how to feel about what happened. Part of me is a little freaked out. I've never had something like this happen to me. The weirder part is the niggling little voice in the back of my head that says, "Forget it, it's not important." I wanted to write this down in case I did forget. I wanted to prove to myself, you know? Before we get to number 1, I want to thank you for listening to Everything Creepy. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss your creepy fix. In mid-November 2016, my house phone rang and I didn't recognise the number in the caller ID. I answered the phone and a child's voice said, "Daddy, are you going to pick me up?" Since my children are 20 and 16 years old, I assumed it was the wrong number, and I told the kid so. He replied, "Dad, it's me. Name of my deceased first child. Please come and pick me up," then hung up. My first child died as a baby 2 years before my 20-year-old was born. His name was extremely uncommon. I haven't told my wife, as she would totally freak out. I told my mother-in-law. She lives with us and was in the room when I answered the call. We cried a little, lots of sad memories surfacing. I still don't know what to make of it. The call freaked me out, and I have no explanation for it. I haven't gone to the cemetery to visit my child's tomb in a while. Maybe I'll do that this week.